Welcome to Liberty FM, the podcast dedicated to all things New York Liberty. I'm Felicia, and I'm joined by my co-host, Francois. The Liberty are on a roll this week, securing their 6th consecutive win against the Connecticut Sun with a score of 82-75. This was a tough matchup and a great game between the current number 1 and 2 teams in the WNBA. With this win, the Liberty clinched their spot in the Commissioner's Cup final while also handing the Connecticut Sun their first loss of the season. Francois, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it. And what a great win for the New York Liberty. We were definitely anticipating and at the same time fearing this game because we knew it was the biggest matchup so far of the season for both teams, actually. And what a performance by the New York Liberty, but what a performance by both teams. It was a really enjoyable game by two great teams, and there was kind of like this feeling of playoff, even though it's still early in the season. But I would definitely say that overall, probably the best performance from the New York Liberty. They show a lot of composure, variety in their games. It was an overall great performance. And we were accustomed of the great first quarter of the Liberty, and there was nothing new with the way they started the game. They started very strong.
Yeah, they per usual, they started really strong, and it was a great thing to see because I think for us, this was the first true test against a top team, a team that they were in the playoffs playing against last year, and Connecticut has been on a roll. They haven't lost a game. So, this was the strong team. They had to come in and be poised and stick together and not have lapses. Obviously, basketball is a game of runs, but they needed to come out and be the aggressor, and they did that, especially in the first quarter. We know that for the Liberty, the first and the fourth quarters are their strongest in most games, but I think the important thing within this game was to keep it going throughout the whole game. Yes, there's going to be runs. We knew Connecticut they have a really tough defense. Any team that faces Connecticut, their defense led by Alyssa Thomas, it's going to be tough. And Stewie had a tough time today against Alyssa Thomas in the first half. But I think for the Liberty, they kept their poise. They stuck together, and it was really a Sab and JJ show today.
Yes.
This was a great game for Sabrina Ionescu and JJ. And I just think that, for them, just seeing the floor, the vision, just the execution by both of them, the way JJ pretty much orchestrated the offense, I feel, a lot of times, just telling players where to be on the floor, and Sabrina, her vision, being able to cut, backdoor pass. I mean, everything in this game was really clicking, even when they had lapses that, and that's part of the game. Everything's not going to go perfect, but for the Liberty, I think they kept poise, and when it got a little bit, frantic at times where they just needed to kind of collect themselves and come back out, I think they did a wonderful job.
Yeah, I think the one play that I particularly paid attention in the first half was when Connecticut started to blitz on Sabrina. Yeah. And we know that before Vandersloot came into the team, Sabrina was, for the most part, the PG of the team and handling, the ball quite a lot. And I remember that those first few seasons, teams will often do that and put a lot of pressure into her and force her to really make a decision. And she would kind of get stuck in that corner or sort of like close to the backcourt violation, and kind of panic and a lot of times lose the ball.
Yeah.
But this time around, one of the first times where Connecticut blitzed, like she kept her composure, she didn't panic, and she had a great pass for Jonquel Jones in the paint. Yeah. And when I saw that, I was like, I think we're there for a good game, because that was different from what we had seen before, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, in this game she led all scorers with 24 points, but the one thing I would say for Sabrina that, driving into the paint, making better decisions, it is like night and day from last year to this year, I would have to say. You saw it kind of coming through last season. it just wasn't fully there, but she really worked on it. And you got to give her flowers. Yeah, she's not going to be the best defender out there. That's what you got Benijah and KT and others for. But Sabrina is working her tail off, and you have to give her props for that, because what we saw today with her cutting to the basket, her speed, she's faster. I mean, all around, Sabrina is becoming that all around player. And it was even with certain lapses. I know she said in the third quarter.
Yes. When Sandy, Alyssa Thomas stole the ball from her.
Yeah, and had that turnover, and Sandy benched her for a little bit. I mean, I think that was great of Sandy, just to get her locked in, because that was just a silly play by her. And yeah, she benched her pretty much for the rest of the third quarter. And so, but it locked her in and got her back in the game, got her fired up and ready to go in the fourth to really seal this game. But again, Sabrina is on fire, and I give it to her, because even if her teammates aren't doing as well, like, you know, even though Stewie didn't have a great first half, she came back in the second and she still did all the little things. And when they needed Stewie, she was there. She knocked down some shots. But again, this was all about Sab and JJ.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about JJ, especially in the second half. But to piggyback on what you were saying on Sabrina Ionescu, yeah, she's on a different level
for sure.
than previous seasons. I mean, she was already a great player, obviously. But I think, you know, adding more into her bag, it makes it more challenging for the defense, because they were accustomed to, you know, you being that three-point shooter, not necessarily going to the paint as much. Or if you were going to the paint, you were kind of like, you know, easy to block you. But this time around, like, now she has so much bag that, you know, it's hard to figure out what to do, and she took advantage of that. She scored 2 threes, but she was only 2 for 6, and instead of forcing shots, she just went to the basket. And we'll talk about some of the plays also that the Liberty set that also allow her to, you know, score points in the paint. But that was definitely a great performance. And, you know, we talked a few podcasts ago about, you know, Sandy Brandello, and we were sort of questioning, you know, as fans, obviously, you know, whether, I don't know, like if Sandy at times was kind of missing something to kind of like, you know, get this team going when they're in the red, right? And that example that you shared of Sandy, like, you know, sort of like try to touch to Sabrina's proud and get her going later, what was great, because she could have easily, like, you know, just try to keep her on the court and, you know, keep it safe. But no, she benched her. And I don't think Sabrina, unlike other games, had many turnovers. I think she had 2 turnovers for the game. So, you know, putting her on the bench, and you could tell, like, Sabrina shared after the game that, yeah, she was upset, but she came back much stronger though.
Yeah.
And that also, you know, is credit to Sandy Brandello for, you know, be able and not be afraid to make tough decisions that, you know, paid off in the end, and that was great. But as we always used to by now this season with the New York Liberty, the second quarter was a different story after being up by 10 points. We know that basketball is a game of runs, and we knew that Connecticut was not going to back down.
Yeah.
And so they made adjustments. First of all, with Tiffany Mitchell coming in from the bench, attacking the basket, scoring 10 points in the first half.
She was the spark for them.
She was definitely a spark, and that was kind of like a struggle for the Liberty. And then the Liberty had a tendency to go under the screen, and Connecticut made them pay. They don't necessarily have tons of like shooters, but they have the one of honor.
Yeah.
And the one of honor, when she gets on fire, whew, that's a trouble. And Ty Harris as well, who added more things into her game. And, you know, she's definitely a good shooter, and added that to her repertoire. And she also offered quite a few moments where, you know, the Liberty could not handle her. And that's, like, I think something, definitely an area of growth for the Liberty, making sure that they play to their strength. And I think, I don't know if, you know, they become complacent or anything. They kind of stopped doing what was working, and sort of forget, like, players like Jonquel Jones, and I don't know. It's just something that they're gonna have to really work on, right?
Yeah, it's still something that they're working on. But I do think that for the second quarter, they did a little bit better. It's not. It's still obviously Connecticut came back and the Liberty won the first quarter by 10 points, and then in the second quarter, Connecticut won that quarter by 10 points. So it was tied, for the half. But you got great defenders like Alyssa Thomas. I mean, she is the metronome of Connecticut.
Yeah,
and so, she is so strong, so fierce. And I think, for her, she gets her team going. When she sees that they're down, she huddles everybody together. She is pushing her team, and they get going. And you can't, everyone on the Connecticut Sun starting lineup, they were all in double figures. And you got to give it up to them. Harris, Carrington. They all did fairly well to stay in there with the Liberty and kind of get the momentum back on their end. And they're at home. So they're a great defensive team. And for Alyssa Thomas in that quarter, she locked down Stewie.
Yeah, Stewie, that's exactly kind of things that you don't want her to, don't want her to do, to try to create from a standstill against a set defense. And, when she gets into those moments where she just keeps dribbling in the perimeter and someone like Thomas will just be right in her face and keep staying on her like a glue. And Stewie, when she does that, it's not working.
It's not going to work. And it's not going to work to get past Alyssa Thomas. Yeah. Like, it may have worked on others, like you can see in previous games.
Yeah, against Atlanta, for example.
Yeah, she was able to get around it. She was able to get past her defender, but not Alyssa Thomas. Alyssa Thomas is one of the best defenders out there. And she just disrupted Stewie from the start. Stewie only got 2 points in the first half. And so... it was a great battle. I would say the first half, it ended up being tied. But I do think we all knew that this game was not going to be easy for either team. These are the top two teams in the league right now, but also for the East.
Yeah.
These are the top two teams. When you look at the East Coast teams, or the Eastern Conference teams, I should say, I don't see anybody else outside of Connecticut and New York really making a run. Yeah. It's a pretty good distance. You got Connecticut and New York battling it out, and then maybe Atlanta. Yeah. After that, you got Chicago, you got Indiana, and you got Washington. They're all teams that are going to struggle this year.
It's a lot of rebuilding teams. So, there's definitely a gap between Connecticut, New York, and the rest of the conference. So, So, by halftime, it's a tie. Pretty good game. And then the third quarter, Connecticut started to make a little run. And at some point, they were up by 7. Mm-hmm. And I think that was very, very interesting. I didn't know how the Liberty were going to react, if they were going to give up and it's going to be a blowout, or they're going to stay in the game. And I think there was something that Sandy Brandello said at the end of the game that was very interesting, where she was talking about that shared experience of last season, battling through the playoff to get to the final, facing tough teams like the Washington Mystics and the Connecticut Sun, and then, losing against the Aces the way they did. That was so crushing. And they say in some of the New York Liberty documentaries, behind the scenes, that was a traumatic moment, not just for the fans, but for them themselves, and something that is going to take some time to recover, but it's in the back of their mind, right? And I'm sure that's something that they had to work on individually, but also as a team. And I think the way they kept their composure and got back into this game, that showed a lot of character from that team. So for anybody that says that this is a soft team, they don't play together, they're not connected, and maybe it was a bit of the case at the start of the season, but that was probably the most character and most poise they show after being down by 7 in the third quarter that I've ever seen, the Liberty with that squad, at least.
Yeah, and at that point, JJ was leading the way
JJ.
at this point.
Jonquel Jones. Big up.
Big up to JJ because she led the way. I mean, whether it was taking the ball on her own, the passes, the vision, just getting to
that's very
to the open player. Yeah,
that's a very underrated part of the game. But like
she
the passing from the arc, like it was magnificent.
Yeah,
you don't see a lot of bigs doing that.
No, and she orchestrated a lot. I would say in the third quarter, especially leading into the fourth. But yeah, it was JJ's game at that point, and she led the offense the rest of the way because I think they just needed that spark. And I think at that point, when Sabrina sat, it was all on JJ at this point, and she really stepped up and she did a great job. It is a thing of beauty when JJ gets going and her decision making as well. I think in this game, yes, you had Bree Jones on JJ, but I think JJ was just a stronger and better player for this game. Her threes, everything was going down for JJ. I think she only missed a handful of shots, really, maybe one or two. I think it was.
I mean, she missed like 5 shots, but she
didn't feel that way.
But she was 9 for 14, so that's an excellent 4 for 7 at the 3-point line. So an excellent percentage.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just as we keep saying, and we're gonna keep repeating this probably every podcast. You got to get it to JJ. If JJ has the ball, whether you're feeding it to her on the inside, this game, she was orchestrating, which was fantastic. But with JJ is that person that can lead you all the way.
Yeah, and I think we always also talk about foul trouble.
Yeah.
She only had 2 fouls in this game because there's many times where she would get, 2 fouls very quickly in the first quarter, get really upset about it and be off a game, and then Sandy has to sub her. We don't really have a lot of options with Sabali out, even though I like what Sandy did with this sort of second rotation lineup to sort of give Jonquel Jones some rest or try to figure out something with her foul trouble. But in this game, she didn't foul a lot. She really stayed focused the whole game. She didn't lose her temper, complaining to the ref or getting frustrated with her play. Like, that's the most composed game I've seen her since the playoff of last year. And she was doing everything. She was, scoring at the post when needed to, being the perimeter and like having those beautiful passes off cuts from some of the players like Breanna and Sabrina, setting screens for Sabrina for her to cut to the basket with the UCLA set. And then scoring those threes when there were times where it's like, Connecticut is getting close, and then bang, JJ will have that free that would like kill whatever momentum
they had.
Yeah. So it was a great performance. I think they said that it was the first time in the history of the New York Liberty that a player had over 20 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 blocks. Tremendous performance.
Did everything on the court today, and it paid off for them in the end. And even the stat that was saying that Connecticut went,
that was a funny moment.
That Connecticut went 1-16 when JJ was defending.
Well,
and so I just think.
And you saw the reaction between Sabrina and JJ at the post-game conference?
Yeah, this was truly JJ and Sab. They are like big sister, little sister. It is fun to see the closeness of those two. You can tell like they just vibe, and you could tell that they're tight. And so it was just great, really great to watch this game. It was a tough matchup, but the Liberty stayed poised. They stayed together in this. They did not give up. And that was the thing. You don't want them to have such a lapse. That was my concern, like when they would have these lapses in the second and third quarter, that a good team like Connecticut could run away with it. Yeah. And then because they're so good defensively, you're going to have a tough time getting back into it. But the Liberty stayed poised. I think the biggest lead Connecticut had on them was 7 points.
Yeah, that's 7-point lead in the third quarter.
This was a tightly matched up game, which I think that it's pretty even when you think about these two teams. I still give the Liberty the edge over Connecticut because they're really good with spacing, and that's just not something Connecticut really has. And so... And just the physicality, when you see Breanna take on Carrington had nothing for her. I'm sorry. As good as Carrington has been this year, Breanna is tougher and stronger.
We didn't talk about Benaja Lenny, but low-key, she had like a all-around performance in this game. Like, we know she's going to defend against one of the best players on the other team. But she was like, cutting to the basket, like driving, and when she goes on the left with her left hand, it's a bucket, right?
Yeah, I mean, she had 10 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists. So
the passing, like I think like.
She was way crisp.
She doesn't necessarily get a lot of assists on average per game, but I feel like this game, she didn't force anything, and she did a little bit like JJ as well, passing from the arc, waiting for someone to cut to the basket, and she also gave quite a few dimes as well to it was mostly Sabrina, I would say. But yeah, the passing from Benaja was great too.
Yeah, I think it was a great game for the starters, overall. Like even for Stewie. Stewie got going in the second half. And again, she did the little things, but when she got some points, she got a critical 3. And she also had some other great buckets down the stretch. And so when they needed her, she was there, and she figured out a way to get around Alyssa Thomas switching off. When she had Bonner on her, she cooked her most of the time. So it was good just to see them really play out of what was going wrong for them in the first half and come in and do so much better in the second half. And also just talking about the bench.
I was going to ask you actually, especially Leonie Fiebich.
Yeah, Leonie Fiebich.
She keeps getting better and better, right?
Yeah, and I think that just comes with getting more comfortable.
Yeah. And
also the teams don't know her. I think she can really be your ace in the hole because the teams, they don't have anything for her yet. And so... they're going to learn her this year as she's going to learn all these other teams. So I think if she can just really stay comfortable and also stay poised, she's going to be a threat. Because as you can see, some of her shots, a couple of them, she was wide open. They were focused more on Sabrina, Stewie, JJ. They're not so much focused on Leonie Fiebich. And so she had a great game as well coming off the bench.
Yeah, and she's a shooter, but unfortunately so far this season, her shots were not that great, or like you could tell like she was still trying to figure out her flow, but now it's starting to look really, really nice, really smooth. And what I like about her, and I think what Sandy is probably going to utilize her quite a bit, is her versatility, whether it's on offense or defense. Because you saw like on defense, like
she has the length.
She was like guarding like either Bonner or Ty Harris, and she could also defend at the post, against Thomas or Breanna Jones. So she offers so many options that not a lot of teams have, and she's a very unique player. I mean, she's the same height. I always mention the height of Asia Wilson because I feel like they two complete different players. But that's unique to have a player of that height and doing so much on the court.
Yeah, I mean, she played 17 minutes. I think she would have played longer if she didn't get into foul trouble. And some of the fouls on her were
3 out of those 5 fouls, I would say, were. I mean,
it was nothing.
Don't get me started with the WNBA ref, but
yeah, I mean, for her, it was a tough night foul wise. Having 5 fouls, and I think she would have played longer because I think KT had an game, but she didn't really have the game.
It wasn't the usual KT night. Maybe that was those Papa John's pizza, like
the Papa John's.
I'm telling you, that was the Papa John's.
You had a New York pizza.
Exactly.
It wouldn't have happened, but you had the pepper, you got the garlic butter sauce. That's a lot of heavy stuff.
Those are the side effects of Papa John's pizza. No disrespect, but
Yeah, I think off the bench it was only Burke, Fiebich, and Doikich. Burke only played 4 minutes, but she was actually effective. She had
was
a
good.
nice pass,
like leaving the door open.
Yeah. She had a nice pass to Benaja. I think they could have played her more, but whatever that decision was, it was to have more of the starters. Totally understand that. Doikich is still frustrating.
Yeah, we're not gonna talk about like a problem or issue just yet, but
she only played 2 minutes, and the 2 minutes was it led pretty much to a shot clock violation on JJ. But I give that to Doikich because it's not JJ's fault. If you're watching this game and you watch the play, Doikich had the ball and JJ is sitting in the corner open.
Yeah.
Waiting. And Doikic should have seen her, but didn't. And only saw her at the last second when the defender was already on her at that point, and it was a shot clock violation. But, yeah, I think for Doikic, it's not working right now. I don't know. The Liberty aren't as lethal as some, as some teams. I feel like she would have been cut.
Let's be honest, some other teams would have already cut her and try to get, someone new. But in a way, it's a good thing that an organization like the Liberty, take their time and give a chance to players to adapt and grow into their game.
I just feel like at this point, you have a better shot putting Marquisha Davis in. I know Marquisha Davis not the point guard, but it's tough.
Yeah, and it's not gonna quiet down the fans that have been asking for Jalen Sherrod for this whole time. And let's briefly talk about it. She was at the game in Atlanta a couple of days ago.
Yeah, she was watching the game. Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, what's happening? Are they gonna recruit her in the summer? Are they gonna try to have a hardship contract? We don't know how long Sloot is gonna be out. So.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what's going on with Sloot, but they definitely need a spark off the bench. So far, Fiebich has provided that in spurts, but they need someone else. I mean, Niara will come back eventually, once she's, I think...
Probably next week.
Probably next week, because that gives her, after tomorrow's game against Washington, they'll have 4 to 5 days off before they, meet Las Vegas. So... Niara will be back, but they definitely need someone else. They need a spark. They need someone quick. And Sherrod could be that person unless they're looking at someone else, but they need someone else. And, if Marine doesn't come back, which it sounds like Marine Johannes may not be coming back for this season. We don't, it seems like she's not coming back for this season. Then they need someone else. And Sherrod could definitely provide that spark. So maybe they're hanging on to her just a little bit. I mean, she was there, so we don't know. We're just speculating, but she would be a good spark off the bench.
Yeah. We'll see. We're not the general manager, so we'll see how things go. Before we conclude our podcast, I just wanted to go back to Breanna Stewart and the shift in the second half, because I think that the first half, we kind of saw a little bit of what we had seen in the playoff last year when, I think she maybe felt the burden and the urge to carry a team during the playoff.
Yeah.
And teams, specifically the Las Vegas Aces, did a tremendous job defensively against her. And I think she was gassed, because she had carried the team all season long.
So much,
she was just running out of gas. And so, especially that play that I mentioned earlier with Alyssa Thomas that defended so well against her, and she only had 2 points in the first half. What did you make of the shift in the second half and how she was able to, find her ways to score and be effective for a team?
I think they opened up the floor more. She didn't, she was definitely moving more. So there was a lot of switches. So she was good where it ended up being not so much Alyssa Thomas on her. It was another defender. Typically it was Bonner, I think, and others, and she was able to get by. And even on Alyssa Thomas, she was able, once she got in rhythm, to get by her. She wasn't trapped as much in a corner. She wasn't trapped at the top of the key. She was able to drive. And I think that just came with the spacing. It came a lot with the spacing, and so that really helped her. And it's Stewie. She's an all-time great. She's one of the GOATs. So she's gonna figure it out. She's gonna find a way. And I like Stewie's game and how she's adjusted to this. Something she said, start of her career, she always played pretty fast. And then this time around, she's learning how to kind of decelerate and accelerate at times. And we saw that in the game, and that really did work for her. There was a point where they thought she traveled and she didn't. She actually just slowed down, and she really took 2 steps when you played it back. It just appeared as though she traveled and she didn't. And so it's just seeing her up her game at this level, but also I think she's giving space to her teammates to do those things as well, because that spaces the floor. If everything is all on Stewie, then everybody's going to come at Stewie. She has to give space. There has to be spacing on the floor that opens up the opportunity for all her teammates, because all of them can score at any given moment. Yes, tonight it was just, the JJ and Sab show. Tomorrow could be Kayla Thornton and Benijah show. Who knows? But again, I think Stewie will dial it up when she needs to. And in this game, even though, she got locked down a lot, she was able to see like JJ, Sab, everyone else was able to contribute. So she didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah, I think, that showed a lot of growth from the team, that, they didn't just, expect Stewie to bail them out.
They didn't just settle.
They figure out other options, other ways to be effective and score. And so overall, a great performance. And we got the win 82-75.
Yeah.
And there was some sort of confusion at the end as to whether we had clinched the Commissioner's Cup final or not, because at first people thought that the number one factor was the point differential, which is very good for us, definitely in our favor. And so you would think that, they haven't clinched the spot yet, even though that would mean that the Connecticut Sun have to win their games by like 40 or 50. But it seems like they clinched the spot because they beat Connecticut, and if the Liberty lose against the Washington Mystics tomorrow, they will have the same record if Connecticut manages to win their last two games. But I think they will have the tiebreaker because they beat them, And the WNBA account made it official that they had clinched the spot. So it seems like for now we know that they clinched, a spot for the final to try to defend their title. We just don't know yet whether it's going to be at home in New York or to the other conference, finalists.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're in a good position. It would be great to have the Commissioner's Cup final for the first time in New York, but we don't know just yet. And we got to finish the job tomorrow. I know it's going to be our first back-to-back of the season against the Washington Mystics. We had some struggles last time around against them. They are the bottom team. They lost again a few days ago against the Indiana Fever. It's tough, but every game against them, no matter what their record is, the games are tight. So it's not going to be easy, right?
I mean, all the Mystics games are tight. They're not necessarily, at least the last few, they're not getting blown out. They're missing a piece. And I know Austin's out, Sykes is out. That's their main pieces of their team.
Yeah.
I think if you had them, they would probably notch a few wins under their belt right now.
Definitely.
But with a team that hasn't won a game yet, those teams, they're hungry. They want to win. So you can't just go in and think, they're the bottom team. No, they want to win. So they're going to come out with everything they got. So, the Liberty have to continue to stay poised, even if they do have heavy legs. They may have to rely more on their bench. And I think it would be good for them to rely more on their bench.
I hope so. I really hope so.
I do think for the Liberty, though, they gotta, as much as they come out strong in the first quarter, maybe Sandy should rest some of them, whether it's Sabrina or Stewie, a little bit earlier in the first quarter, because it seems like why they are so great in the first quarter, she keeps the starters in for pretty much the entire quarter almost.
Yeah.
And then the second quarter, she starts to make these changes, but that's a lot of times when teams come back because Sabrina's on the bench or JJ's on the bench or Benijah's on the bench. And it's hard to, I just think they might need to rest them a little bit early if they come out pretty good in the first quarter. So it's not going to be an easy game at all tomorrow for the Liberty. And I was just thinking about the fact that I was like, why is the point differential so high for the Liberty? And I forgot they beat Indiana by 36 points.
That definitely helps.
that was a huge help because I was like, man, their point differential is really high. What did they? And Indiana. Sorry, Indiana, but we need that one.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Sandy, you could also argue that after that game, they will have their biggest stretch without a game.
Yeah,
I think
great for
5
them.
days off, 5 days until they face the Las Vegas Aces. So you could argue that you could still continue to play your starter without having to worry about a game that will come up soon. But I do think that it would be wise to play the bench more, because Sabrina did say that even though they didn't make it an excuse, that the fatigue and everything, and especially playing such a tough team like Connecticut, you're gonna lose a lot of energy. And the Mystics are already in New York. We surprisingly bumped into them today in the streets of New York. So they're rested, they're ready. And the Liberty will have to travel back to New York tonight, this afternoon. And then play at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So the fatigue is gonna be there. So hopefully they can play a lot of the bench players and have a good overall performance. I think they're definitely capable of doing it. But that's gonna be another test to see the resilience of that team on the back-to-back. Yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That concludes our podcast for today. A great win, a great feeling. Let's hope we wrap this up nicely tomorrow. But thank you guys for your support and for listening to our podcast. And as we always say, Felicia,
let's go Liberty!